Good morning, Saturday the 16th of January 2021. Pastor Ron Jetter, Immanuel Lutheran Church, Grandview, Washington. Today we arrive at that wonderful, horrible, oft-quoted, oft-misunderstood 18th chapter of the book of Leviticus. Wow, yeah, the one that deals with sex, with immorality, the one that allows those of us who consider ourselves pure and righteous to point the finger at you know who. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to pat ourselves in the back and go, well, I'm not like them. Therefore, I am righteous and I will keep my statutes before the Lord. Two words jump out from this chapter. One of them, depravity, the other, abomination. Abomination really gets at that first commandment. I am the Lord your God. Remember that. Listen to me. Do what I tell you to do. Don't do what I don't tell you to do. Don't tell what I tell you not to do. I am the Lord. It's abominable to have anything that even smacks of another god or following the practices of these tribes that are all around you that you're now interacting with. They're suggesting things to you. Don't listen to them. You do what I tell you to do. You don't do what I tell you not to do. You don't follow their example. I'm your God. Everything they do is abominable because it didn't come from me. Secondly, depravity, that which leads to death. I said a couple of days ago, sitting is the new smoking, okay? You sit too much, you're too sedentary, you get overweight, you get blood clots, you get strokes, and those lead to paralysis or death. Eating too much, drinking too much, smoking too much sugar. There are any number of things we can physically do to ourselves. There are things we can do mentally to ourselves. Lots of ways. And the fact is, we are going to someday die. Paul says that because sin lives in our flesh, the grave is the only way to kill sin. We're going to be sinners our whole lives. We're going to be abominable and depraved. Accept it, and at the same time, accept that we are loved by God. Dual citizenship in the kingdom of God and the kingdom of humanity. We are dual. Simul justia et peccatore, Martin Luther said. Simultaneously, sinner and saint. Fully both, every day of our lives, until the grave claims the sinner and releases the saint to live on alone for God. Until then, we got lots of stuff to wrestle with. The 18th chapter specifically deals with how God describes this vision of creating families that are whole, that are healthy, because a family is a basic building block of a stable society, of a stable tribe, a stable community. Families do one thing. They produce generations. How can God's promise to Abraham, whose descendants were going to number like the stars, happen unless they followed basic practices? A man and a woman are married and have as many children as they can, who themselves get married and have children, who themselves get married and have children. That's it. And the children, the males being the ones they desire, grow up to be warriors who protect, defend, and conquer, who are also hunters and gatherers, who can also be herders and farmers. The women then become the people who support the men in all that the men do. First thing we would notice in reading Leviticus, especially the 18th chapter, is that these words aren't directed at the community, at all of the people. They're directed at the men. If you uncover so-and-so, it's talking about the men. The women by default. But a woman who herself becomes the aggressor or the initiator in any sexual thing, she's abomination, she's depraved. So, but men, I mean, it starts off, you will keep my statutes and my ordinances. By doing so, you will live. Then verses 6 through 18 deal with the single concept of incest, and they have to cover every possible relationship over and over and over. none of you shall approach anyone near of kin to uncover nakedness. That's how they word it. I am the Lord. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your father, which is the nakedness of your mother. She's your mother. You shall not uncover her nakedness. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your father's wife. Oh, wouldn't that be your mother? Oh, because if your mother died, your father got remarried? Wow, okay. So then they cover all of these, your sister, your brother, and so on and so forth. No incest. We know incest biologically leads to inborn kinds of mutations, genetic anomalies. When I worked in hospice, we had a pediatric program. We saw a lot of children born with various kinds of birth defects, and they shortened their lives in drastic ways, shortened their abilities to function. For instance, with these trisomies, Lewy body, or not Lewy body, but different kinds of muscular dystrophies, and just all sorts of things. And we know that we can now test for some of these. At the same time, where do these come from? Well, God somehow tells them, even back then, they didn't have the medical understanding. How did they know that incest can lead to breeding certain kinds of genetic anomalies and birth defects into a civilization? They needed to be healthy if they're going to conquer the land. They can't afford to be taking care of children and babies who are, in their eyes, blemished or defective. Now today we would say we take care of everybody. We would consider it abominable and depraved to somehow discard children or people who were born with less than perfect bodies or less than perfectly sharp minds. Back then it was a little more harsh. They couldn't afford what they considered that which kept them from being at their fighting best. But now again, this language of uncovering your father's nakedness, go back to Ham. Ham walks in on his dad. And his dad, Noah, had just come in from enjoying the first fruits of the planting of his vineyard. He drank the wine and he got a little drunk. He didn't cover himself. Ham walks in and sees it and, accidentally saw his father without his clothes on. He backed out and told his brothers, and so then they backed in and covered their dad up without looking. But God then declares Ham's son Canaan as the enemy, and all of Canaan's descendants, that is the Canaanites, who are now occupying the land of Canaan that the Israelites are now ordered to conquer. The Canaanites are cursed by God. And it goes, these are intertwined, these ideas, because just in case Ham might be, I don't know, a little, so their sexual rules were designed for one thing, to allow a very narrow view of family, period. So then we get down to verse 19 about when a man should not lie with a woman, when a woman is unclean. Okay, so do not do that. And then verse 22, you shall not lie with a male as with a woman. It's an abomination. One line. Okay, here you go. And then one line, you shall not have sexual relations with an animal. Okay, one line. So as I say, some preachers will take verse 22, one line, and say, okay, that means that anytime a man is in love with a man, and by extension, then a woman is in love with extension, it's an abomination, it's depravity, and God hates it, and God will punish them. If the goal of Leviticus is to create stable families, how might we then understand that today? That what they're saying is having desire for someone while you have a family is not okay. God did not permit that because they didn't have room for that. They didn't have time for that. They had a life and death battle on their hands every day to survive in that land. So they could not be using their sexual energies where they were non-productive. And this goes on into the church then, where the Catholic Church says, oh, if you're going to have sexual relations, it better produce a child. It better not be for pleasure. And it certainly better not be for pleasure with someone of the same gender. Interesting, Pope Francis just last year, of all the bad things that came out of 2020, one of the good ones is the Pope saying, you know, we've got to stop condemning people just because they happen to love someone of the same gender. We got to stop doing that. Our understanding, first of all, is not as a people who are trying to conquer a land like they were 3,300 years ago. Second of all, we can't use one verse out of one chapter, out of one book, and ignore the rest of it. Either we apply the entire Levitical law or we don't. We can't pick and choose. Third of all, stable relationships, if that's what it's about, stable relationships can occur when two people love each other. And shouldn't we then as a society find ways to say, let's make that legal so that they have full rights, full recognition as people who love each other and want a stable family? Isn't that really what the goal is? Fourth of all, who am I to judge? I mean, really? See you tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Sunday school, 10 a.m. worship.